Dear Earthmates, we are visiting Chile, and the president of Chile, Senor Germán Rojas, is welcoming us, hosting us. Thank you so much, dear Germán. Your country has been in my heart, on my mind since my early youth, starting with Allende. I just wanted to mention it. You are not only a leading person in literature, but also a peace activist. And it seems peace activism is once again, unfortunately, very vital in human history. What would you like to say about your peace activism and literature there? How did those concerns begin?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Tariq, for the invitation. I didn't realize that I was a writer until I almost published my first book, because I always took it just as a kind of second activity. That was mainly because I started very young to get involved in politics. You were precisely mentioning the government of Allende. I was a member of that government. I participated. I was working in La Moneda Palace, where the bombing occurred in our 11th of September, 1973. I was not there, and that was something that saved my life in a way. But for that involvement in politics, always peace was very, very important, because we were living times of confrontation at national level in Chile by then, and also at world level because of this East-West confrontation proper of the Cold War. I was a member I was 21 when I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was located inside the presidential palace. So that was the reason I was working there. And in that position, I was dealing, first of all, from a governmental point of view and as member of the government on the different issues. We were very active by then in a so-called non-aligned movement, which was a movement launched in 1955 by people like Nehru, like Nasser, like Tito, trying to create space in the middle of the confronting powers. And that was successful in the way that many countries joined and a third voice was raised, but was not successful because of the presence of the superpowers by then, where everything under control. So it was very, very difficult to create that space. And but we do a lot of things on that. During Allende's government, we also were engaged in the organization of the third conference of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which was an occasion for developing countries to get together, to see what things were of common interest and try to create better conditions for for trading, for technologies, for investments, for dealing with transnational corporations, etc. And that immediately after that created the space for the idea of fighting for a new world economic order, which was finally adopted by the United Nations by 120 votes in favor and 6 against, but never was implemented because of the 6 votes against that were important countries. But anyway, I'm not putting the accent in the failures. I'm putting the accent in the fact that there's been always a space for putting the needs of countries, of poor countries particularly, the underdeveloped countries, in a world position that could improve the situation of people. And then there was a very close link between that situation of underdevelopment that I saw in those years with the fact of peace, because peace was at a threat in many countries, but not in the main superpowers after the Second World War. So wars were fought in the name of superpowers and the interest of superpowers by then. And we were in that partly victims of that, but at the same time we were responsible for that, because in many nations it was developed this nationalism that was in many cases close to the ideologies, and the ideologies were confronting, and the confrontation was leading to lack of peace. But then I realized, and not only myself, a lot of people realized that the conditions of poverty, of underdevelopment, were conditions, excellent conditions for the development of war or confrontation in countries. Because in some cases, you didn't need to have an open war in a country, but repression was there, and lack of peace was there. And as you know, in 1973, there was this coup d'etat in Chile. I was arrested after the coup d'etat, well, sent to jail, torture, etc., and then expelled out of the country, was sent to exile. And then in exile also, I had more possibilities of getting directly involved with different initiatives linked to peace. Especially in countries I was living in Europe. I started in Norway, then in France, and there were very active national committees in those countries of solidarity with Chile. And in that there was a possibility to be involved with people working on peace issues. For example, I had a great opportunity to work for a very short period, however, with Dalton, the Peace Research Institute in Norway. He was one of those that started with this Peace Research Institutes in Europe. I didn't continue that because I left Norway and I moved to France, mainly because the solidarity and the political activity against Pinochet was more active in Paris, in France. So that was the reason why I left Norway. I have very good memories of what happened, of my life there, the way they received me and they treat me in Norway.
Yes.
Unforgettable.
Yes. Young Earthmates may not know, but Henry Kissinger, at that time, when a democratic socialist party won the elections legitimately, democratically in your country, he said, an irresponsible nation cannot be left to itself. And he wanted a military coup d'etat, and that took place. And I wrote a poem about Allende. It's not published. I would like to send it to you when I get back to Turkey. Peace, of course, I think in the real sense has never happened in our world. It's something of an ideal. We usually use the word peace when there is a lack of open war or confrontation. But usually it's cold peace. Just like there is Cold War, we use Cold War. We can also use the words, I think, cold peace. But PEN has been for 100 years, more than 100 years now. We as PEN members, we have always been very much in the peace struggle, and it is easier said than done. There is no limit, and you're also how about your focusing on literature? I mean, how has that developed?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was lucky because when I was a child, my father was all the time reading to me poems. When I was very, very small, 5 years, 6 years old. So I started listening to this sound, to this kind of music that was involved. And that was the first thing that something developed inside myself about the relationship with that. So I like it. And I was a good reader when I was a boy. And but after a while, I think that the first time I wrote myself was an occasion that very sad occasion when my sister, she was 19 by then and I was 15, she committed suicide. And for me it was the first day, the first occasion in which death entered into my life from the front door.
So very, very tragic. Yes.
I wrote something, thinking of that pain, thinking of her, and that came written in a vertical way, and it was called a poem. I lost that piece of paper, and I've never tried to recreate that poem again. That was my first way of expressing myself, of taking something from inside to the external world, even if it was a poem that I never shared with anybody. It was something in just to express myself. And that continued. Yes.
How was your sister? How old was your sister?
She was 19, and I was 15, so she was very, very young, and me too, obviously. I still remember her as my elder sister, but she still has 19 years. But anyway, the point is that after that, I continue writing in a kind of clandestine way, not sharing this activity with anybody. Especially even when I started to work with involved in politics, things were so demanding, so pressing in a way. The world was changing. We were a generation that was in a possibility of changing the world. So that was something incredible that does not happen to all generations. And to say in those conditions were revolutionary times in a way, to say, well, I am a writer and in my free time I write poems, was almost like expressing some kind of weakness in the middle of the situation. You see. So that was the reason that I didn't make this. I didn't share with with my friends and my generation, that fact. But that situation changed when I arrived to Europe as an exiled person. And again, was the pain. The pain separated from my country, how that was processed. The time passed in prison. All the things that meant for me in a way were very difficult times. And I used to write especially just to express those feelings that are inside myself, but always as something that very few people knew, who are shared the things I wrote. Until very late in Italy, when I talked to a friend, Italian friend, about the fact that I used to be a writer about whatever, but without saying that I am a writer. And then he was living in Milan and I was living in Rome. So he realized all the time that maybe that was something in myself that could be it's hiding something important for him. And he said, please share with me one poem. And I did it, very embarrassed to show what I read. And he said, well, this is very good. I will send to a friend of mine who is a director of a literature magazine in Bari, Italy. And I did it. I translated that poem into Italian first, and then I sent it to this guy. And the director of this magazine wrote me back saying that he will publish this poem, and he sent me a copy of the magazine. And in that magazine, I read that there was a call for a national literary poetry contest in Italy. And I said, well, this is excellent because I will have the possibility of translating into Italian some of my poems, and then I will share these poems in Italian with my friends. That was my whole purpose. And I did it, and I presented myself to the contest, and incredibly, I won the contest. And the book was published. That was the prize.
Wonderful. And
then with the editorial, the Casa Editrice, the printing house, I used to travel around Italy, in poetry recitals, and they were selling my book. So that was a win-win game, you see. So, and
wonderful.
That was a starting. That was a starting, and then when I had that book already, it was a different thing. I started with participation, mainly in Italy because I was living there. But afterwards, I came to Chile. I published in Spanish the book that won the contest, etc. And here I started also the relationship with the writers in my country, and that was the beginning of the whole story, and that came afterwards.
Wonderful, muy bien. In Saudi Arabia, I studied Spanish a little. Deseo hablar español, pero no puedo. But when my wife and we visited Spain, I made use of a few words. And because in 1980s, when I was teaching in English in Aramco, Saudi Arabia, there was this Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua, and I wanted to go to Nicaragua. That was my fantasy. And I'm really sad that now the Nicaraguan Pen Center has been outlawed. And it's sad that sometimes a movement that aspires liberation turns into the opposite and becomes oppressive. That's an important issue. And but what do you think about? By the way, if the Spanish empress, had not decided to support Christopher Columbus, Spanish, instead of Spanish, there would be Italian in Latin America, right? Am I wrong?
No, more probably Dutch.
Dutch, yes.
They would have arrived first.
Oh, yes. Very interesting. How, such decisions, to promote an idea or not to promote an idea leads to, wow. I mean, it's like when in China, a butterfly, it may cause a storm in the West. This is the kind of example. Should I give enough support to this project or not? Wow. And you speak quite a few languages, I guess.
Yes. With all this travel around, I speak, Spanish, obviously, English, and Italian. Those are the three languages that I speak very, very fluently. Then I speak French and Portuguese. And I believe that if I go back to Norway, most probably in 3 months, I will recover the Norwegian I used to speak.
Wonderful.
To speak.
Yes, and so your life, you experienced exile as well. So you understand writers in exile
yes.
in a different way. Of course,
because that was also important to read many of them in their own language. That's a very good advantage in the sense that I do not need to go through a translation. So it's very, very important. I would say that in my case, the influence, mainly when I was at school, I was a student with the Jesuits here, that they, from an academic point of view, they're very, very good. And I had that possibility of knowing the classics, Dante Alighieri, Shakespeare, Cervantes, those of the golden centuries, Francisco de Quevedo, Lope de Vega, were things that gone, many names. So that was one first channel of influence, that this awakeness inside myself for the world of poetry. But being a Chilean, we have to say that in this country there are many poets, but there are a few group that are excellent poets. We have 2 Nobel Prizes, Gabriela Mistral and Pablo Neruda, which are big names.
Neruda is well known in Turkey and respected highly, and at Istanbul Metropolitan Theatre, where I worked and retired from, a play about Neruda's life was also on stage. And in Turkish, as I mentioned before recording, we say Şili instead of Chile. In Turkish, Chile means pain or trouble. It's what you go through, suffering. Yes, Chile is suffering. So that's why in Turkish, I think one of the reasons is we don't say Chile, we Şili. The Latin American history, of course, is very rich, diverse. How are the relations between the Brazilian people and poets, Portuguese speakers, and Spanish speakers? Is this an idiotic question? I just came to mind.
Yeah, we have this problem of language at the end, no? That they speak Portuguese, we speak Spanish, and despite the fact that they are very close languages, in a way, they are not the same. So and then you have the local accents. That could be in Brazil. You have many different. It's different the way how a person from Rio de Janeiro will speak, or one from the south, or one from the northeast. They have differences, etc. The same with Latin Americans. We have a common language, which was the main gift left by the Spaniards here in our region. And we're very grateful for that, because I prefer certainly to write in Spanish and not in Dutch today, because Spanish is a language very proper for poetry. It's a music.
Language of Cervantes. You know.
Well, Cervantes is an example. But anyway, there is always this distance among the Latin American countries. Is because looking from outside, people think that we are very, very united, and we have, and they have a wrong idea of the situation. Here we live, unfortunately, more isolated from each other. This is changing a little bit now because of the new situation, new technologies, etc. But in the past, for example, Chilean poets didn't know what the Argentinians were writing, or Colombians, or not to say Mexicans. Today it's more common. Even we speak in literature of the Latin American boom that happened in the 60s, and those were Latin American writers writing, each one from their own, but all of them living in Spain. Many of them living in Spain. And that created this common language, even of people that didn't speak among themselves. So it was a very strange phenomenon what happened there. But that's the reason why we don't have a close contact with Brazilians for that. I have tried to do something, and I will as PEN Chile, would like to implement with PEN Brazil some at least taking advantage of new technologies also for encounters poetry that we can exchange, because the Brazilian, well, they have excellent poets also in the history in Brazil and in Portugal, like Fernando de Pessoa, for example, the Portuguese. But anyway, there are many people that we simply don't know that they write and what they're writing. So this is a pending issue that we have. And unfortunately, we have not done enough yet, but we should. And I think the willingness to do it exists. So that's something good. And that's also for the relationship with the Latin Americans, because I was telling you that I was influenced when in Chile because of the different Chilean poets, but at the same time we had the contact with, had the possibility of reading people like Octavio Paz, Nicolás Guillén, Cuban, Mario Benedetti from Uruguay, César Vallejo, a Peruvian, excellent. He died too young in the 30s. Anyway, there are many writers, you see, that are a source for influence, and they influenced me, together with one exception, which was not in Latin America, but was certainly the first one influencing us, is Walt Whitman, Whitman opened the doors for this way of expressing poetry, not linked and tied to formalities in poetry. So that was excellent. And then in my case also, and for Latin America, we had a very strong influence of what is called in Spain the generation of 1927. That means García Lorca, Antonio Machado, Rafael Alberti, Gabriel Celaya, There are excellent writers that they went through the terrible situation of the Spanish Civil War, and many of them came to Latin America as refugees, and we had the possibility of knowing them. Even with Alberti, we were very neighbors in Rome. I had the possibility of talking to him. It was an extraordinary person. So that was a group of writers that, well, Pablo Neruda was not a Spaniard, but was one of those Latin Americans that was involved and formed part of the same generation in a way. No? Those were born around the first years of the previous century, 20th century. So that was also another important source of influence of the things. And I'm constantly reading those poets.
Did you get together with Neruda?
Yeah, well, I met him in 1967 when he presented there was a theater work, that a piece of theater, the only one he wrote is Fulgor y Muerte de Joaquín Murieta. That it's
pardon, I didn't understand the last sentence.
It's the name of that it's a book. It's Fulgor y Muerte de Joaquín Murieta. Joaquín Murieta is a person, a real person who went to California in the looking for gold, etc. So and he became a bandit there. So it's the story of this, in a way, expressing also a revolutionary way of facing. But he was not a political activist. So, but Neruda took that as an image of so many things that represent the real soul of Latin America. Well, and then he...
Sorry, sometimes there is a sound problem. The last few sentences I couldn't catch.
Yeah, no, I was said that Neruda was in a way taking this person who was not a revolutionary man. He didn't belong to any political party, but he was against the system in a way in the US where he immigrated. So it took that as a symbol of many things of the Latin American soul. So that is a way of expressing, as Neruda said, you're telling stories that were with a second text behind, in the sense of expressing many things of the values, culture, behaviors, beliefs of our region. And then I met him for the first time. And then when he was a candidate for the presidency of the Republic in Chile, there were two pre-candidates, Salvador Allende and Pablo Neruda. Pablo Neruda for the Communist Party, Salvador Allende for the Socialist Party. And I met both of them in separate occasions, you see, to speak about politics. I was member of the youth of the coalition of parties that were supporting Allende, what after was Allende's government. And that was very interesting to meet him, to meet Neruda in that capacity. But he was always much more concerned with literature and poetry than with politics, you see. So for me, it was a great opportunity to meet him that time. And it's not, well, and afterwards, the group of parties, it was called Unidad Popular, elected Salvador Allende as the representative and the candidate who later won the election. See? So that's to shorten the story. But it was, I mean, Neruda is very influential in our generation. It's impossible not to.
Yes, very interesting, exciting conversations you had, I'm sure. Are you writing your memoirs, or have you written some of them?
I'm writing them. It's not memoirs in a way of covering all my life, but it's especially concentrating in some years that were very, very crucial for me. And certainly I'm doing references to the past and also to present times there. But that's a work that I hope to finish in a couple of years, because I still have a lot of things. And while I'm working on that, I'm still new ideas come to my mind to include, etc. But so afterwards, I prefer to write what I feel, and then go through a process of being more selective after the work, the basic structure is done. See, so the problem is that with pen, it's so well. I'm happy for that anyway. So demanding. The time that one has to devote for the activities, etc., of international, and I like that part, especially the one related to human rights, etc. But you have to pay a price for
of
that.
Course.
And,
yes.
And I
time, energy.
The way women they have this capacity of doing so many things at the same time. I am unable, but anyway, I have to be patient with myself, and I hope to finish that book someday, and not too far away from today.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you will be an excellent international chair of PEN Peace Committee. By the way. And I recall in my 20s, in 1970s, in Turkey, we used to sing probably in supporting psychologically Unidad Popular, United Peoples Front, right? In Turkish it would go, Şili'de halk bugün savaşıyor. Cesaret ve hakkın gücüyle. Kahrolsun halkın katili junta. Yaşasın Unidad Popular. So this is in Chile. People are struggling against the massacring junta, and long live United Front, United Peoples. So
yeah, that was the anthem. Yeah, the one you were singing was the anthem of the Unidad Popular. Yeah.
Yes. The thing is, some people, I think, some people seem to be satisfied with whatever they have achieved or however they live, and some people want better, not in this with a positive passion, let's say. When the Soviet bloc collapsed, and I said, okay, we know now how it cannot be done, but how can we transcend capitalism? That has been on my mind. Because limiting my vision, my horizon with capitalism has never been, for 50 years, have never been appealing to me. I mean, some people will want just for profit, more and more profit, and that will be the best thing in life. I don't think so. But free enterprise, although we used to, when in my youth, we used to think that concept in relation to capitalism, but free enterprise is actually a neutral term. I mean, we as writers, poets, each of us is entrepreneur also. We take steps, we use our initiative. And so we need more people to take initiative in life and to express themselves and to form positive, fruitful synergies. PEN is a wonderful international platform in that sense. And as you know, there is this growing group that I initiated, Earth Civilization Network, including inviting not only writers or people of literature, but all areas. For example, a friend will soon join from Venezuela. He focuses on agriculture, Luis. We need a multi-professional, multi-background synergy. How about so-called indigenous peoples? How about that? A very important part of life and society, of course. How are things in Latin America, specifically in Chile? I have no idea, honestly.
Well, this is it's an old new reality. It's old in the sense that it has existed for 500 years, this repression against the local people, the originary people that were living in this territory.
Excuse me, the sound sometimes blurs.
Yes, I said that in this territory, the people who lived before the arrival of Spaniards were very badly treated. Chile was, I would say, the only territory in Latin America that had 300 years of war between Mapuche people and Spaniards. 300 years.
I didn't know that.
We speak of the pacification of the Mapuche territory in 1883. So that was almost 70 years after the independence of Chile. So it's not only that the Spaniards were responsible, also the new government that came after the independence was responsible for that. And they were always neglected, invisible for years and years. Many people was also in a way ashamed of showing their origins, their last names, etc. For many years. But now we are living a kind of revival of a new culture that feels the possibility of influencing and establishing new rules for the game, and that is one of the elements that are present today in the discussion that we are going through, the elaboration of a constitution. For the first time in the Chilean history, we have a group of 154 people elected for the drafting of the constitution. All the previous constitutions we had were just small groups, 5, 7 people at the most, writing those. And only in one occasion, and that was 2 occasions, but the important one was with Pinochet, that he made a kind of referendum to approve his constitution in a period when nobody dared to say nothing against the government. So
excuse me, Germán. The visual. Oh yes, now we are back visually. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I would say that the only occasion there was a referendum was with the constitution drafted by a commission under the orders of Pinochet, and that was a referendum that was not at all acceptable. See, and not any democratic rule was in force.
Yeah, in Turkey too. After the military coup in 1980, the new constitution was forced by the military at that time.
Yes. So we're now facing a unique situation in which we have a constitution, a draft that should be now be voted, but all the people approve or not in September, the first week of September this year. And in that constitution, the proposal is to define Chile as a plurinational society. So accepting, the fact that there's not only descendants of Spaniards, but we have to recognize here the existence of different ethnies and peoples because they're not only the Mapuche, there are other ones, tiny ones compared to the Mapuches, but they're different. There are 9 different groups in Chile, and they have to be recognized. And that's very, very, very important. It's a new stage for that. And I think that will imply also the approval of, after the approval of the Constitution, of the laws that should implement the rights. It's not only enough to say that, all Chileans have the right to education if you don't implement some specific laws to make that possible, you see. We say that according to statistics that 98% of the population, they are literate people. But we know that many of those that have gone through a process of education, then they lost the possibility of reading because they never use reading in their daily lives. So it's not that 98%, is less than that, certainly. And then how we could sustain a legal system that will provide the elements for that people for all the people to have access to equal and better education. That's one example. I can speak the same for health, for all the social rights in a way. The right to food, for example. I work in the UN for many years on the implementation of the right to food, for example. And this is not even mentioned in our constitution today. It doesn't exist. It's not the case in the one that has been proposed. It has not ended the process of drafting the new text. There's still some pending issues, but as far as I've seen, but there is a reference to the right to food and many other rights that were not explicit in the previous constitution. And so it's important to have conscience of the fact that we need not only to approve a constitution, but we need to implement other legal instruments to make that rights become a reality, which is our main challenge. I would say it's not only a Chilean challenge, by God's sake. It's the same for so many different countries in the region of Latin America, and I know in Africa it's the same, and Asian countries, etc. So that's a pending issue that we have in front of us in this way of trying to develop a more humanitarian face to capitalism, the thing that you were saying before. Now we don't have two systems contradicting each other, socialism and capitalism. We have only one, but that you can refrain that concept just to economics, and that would be the terrible thing. Or you open the discussion to a more humanitarian aspects that should be involved, and to implement also not only the freedom, but the liberty, but also justice, which is missing sometimes, many times, and are the reason for the lack of peace in the world. So many times because of the lack of justice, no?
True. How about mythology? Latin America is very rich in terms of mythology. And in Turkey, we know about Asturias, how is the relationship of the poets, writers in general, with Latin American mythology?
We have, depending on the, I would speak of the big, from a demographic point of view, groups of indigenous people here. We have the Aztecas, for example, in Mexico, with many others, but those were the most important one, having the control when the Spaniards arrived. Then we have the Quechuas in Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador. We have Mayas in Central America, who have that tremendous force in mythology, and also the poetry that they developed was closely linked to the myths in those societies. In Chile, because of this situation of war that we had, the possibilities of developing a mythology of the indigenous people was very, very difficult for them. Now we have myths, etc., but they were always taken into a second, not as a main consideration it was not at the same level as the other mythologies of other indigenous people in Latin America. No? But this second-class mythology now has a revival. And last year, for the first time, a poet of Mapuche origin was recognized with the National Prize of Literature here in Chile, which is very, very important for them and for us, because those that we don't have this origins of ethnic origins of the Mapuche people belong to the same society, and we have to be together, to construct together this country on the basis of respect, mutual understanding, common vision of a future that would take into consideration the needs of everybody here. So,
excuse me, we have a visual problem. Sometimes, yes, now we have you back. Yes, sometimes the picture freezes, but your talking, your speaking is so wonderful, colorful that it's not bothering at all. I mean, it's dynamic and colorful. Anyway,
when editing, you can put a picture.
No, I cannot edit. I'll just put it as raw. This is I'm an amateur, and this. Well, it's fine. I mean, this is, and I'm not trying to make these so professional. I mean, I could invite some professional friends, etc. But the reason is, what I'm doing here can be a good example for many Earthmates, and they can invite other people and just have interviews like these easily without the professional and all the other stuff. You know, just let this be an example of naive, amateurish enthusiasm.
Yes, I like that approach a lot, Tariq, because I feel myself like sitting at your home and talking with you, and not being in a kind of formal interview.
Wonderful.
And that's very, very nice, and I appreciate a lot this space that you are created, and the way of speaking without it's just like a conversation among friends.
Yeah. This is, I think this is a peaceful interview. And I think for years, decades, I've been trying to live in harmony with my ideals about the future of humanity. I mean, what kind of a world do I want to live in? Am I behaving in harmony with those ideals? So if I want a peaceful world, then how can I be aggressive in my daily life? I should not have. And then when it comes to pollution, for example, environmentalism, being angry all the time like this is against environmentalism, because you are part of the environment. We are part of the environment. And what kind of energy are we spreading? So an environmentalist should be pleasant as much as possible in behavior, whatever, for example, Dalai Lama is a good example. I mean, he gives a positive energy, and the present Pope too, I think. This, and I consider myself a listener, because I'm a writer, speaker, etc. But how about listener? Freedom of expression means nothing if nobody is listening. We can have 100% freedom of expression, but if we don't listen, what's the use? So back to the basics, like Socrates did 2,500 years ago. Back to the basics. What is this? What is love? What is listening? What is solidarity? What is peace? Those basic words. Each generation, everywhere in the world, I think we need to ask these simple questions, basic questions, naively. As children, not only like children, but as children, and asking these questions to so-called children as well, and listening to them. And so the joy of learning, I always enjoy saying that I wake up joyful in the morning because I am more ignorant than I was before, because during my sleep, so many things happened. And there is so much new information and knowledge. So instead of feeling myself under the pressure of information overload, I look at the glass from the other angle and say, there's more to learn. And I'm glad. If there is an entity that knows everything, that entity must be so bored, because there is nothing that entity can learn. It's a pity that you know everything, nothing to learn. How boring, you see. So this playful attitude, that's why that movie, that film, Life is Beautiful, is full of wisdom. Because, there is tragedy in Afghanistan, in Ukraine, in Palestine, Yemen, and other places. we shouldn't be closed to those tragedies, but we also need to have the power and the positive energy to try to deal with some of the issues at least. And so we when I was 19, I asked this leading satirist, Aziz Nesin. He was 57. When I told him I wanted to become a writer, he said, "You're in a tough job, good luck." And I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I have to be well." At that time, I didn't understand him. I have to be well. Yes, but he was right. Because when you take responsibilities, when you assume responsibilities, you also feel that, well, you got to be well. There is no other chance. You got to be in good spirits enough to keep struggling, to living, etc. And recently, I think I started to understand Tolstoy a little bit better. I wrote a play about him, and I always, since my youth, asked myself, how come in his old age he pushed aside his great works such as Anna Karenina and War and Peace aside. He said, these are not important. The masses don't understand them. And can you, instead of writing something new, why not go and help a poor child, do something concrete? I think now I understand him a little bit more because, okay, it's not a dilemma. Actually, we should keep writing, etc. But also, yes, doing something concrete in daily life. And that's why you are a peace activist. You're not in your corner limiting yourself to your fantasy world or only feeling sorry for people and writing deep poems, just limiting yourself without active as a world citizen, without being active. And I think I want to criticize my colleagues who refrain from active politics because politics is life. It's too dear, too valuable to be left to politicians. Because if we leave politics to politicians, then we say, do, dear politicians or undear politicians, do whatever you wish to me. My life belongs to you. That's horrible. Why should I not be in direct politics as much as I can? And that's how we can transcend politics, as I think Marx wished, transcending political parties, transcending politics. And because only when everybody practically, ideally, becomes a politician or activist, then we can transcend politics and do without politicians. Politics, in the narrow sense, is like pornography. I mean, that's. I wanted to make this statement, and how come? Because what is pornography? It's limiting sex to a certain area. So we can have a pornography of anything as if we limit a certain area away from the rest of life, instead of trying to embrace life as a whole. If we limit politics to politicians or political parties, well, they are also pornographic tradesperson, merchants. So here is Judith Hill uses the adjective provocateur for herself. I respect that. I find that hilarious, so wonderful. We need to be provocateurs. So that was a provocative statement by me now. So,
I was saying that your thoughts now were having a special impact on the role I should play now in the Writers for Peace Committee, in the sense that in a way, are an invitation to transform certain aspects of the work of PEN International in the way of doing more universal. It's not a matter of peace should be restricted to areas in conflict. We must keep an eye on, a very close eye on those conflicts, indeed, but it's not the only way of approaching. We have to open the committee to regional visions. Africans, Latin Americans, Asians, Near East people should have a say.
In Turkey too, our Kurdish citizens, their cultural rights.
Of course, that's very, very important, and this is not something just. I mean, to open the doors, open the windows to the participation of different writers and PEN centers in a more organical way. That is something that we can do much more actively now. And the other thing is that, as you know, PEN International has 4 committees, important committees, dealing with women's writers, with writers in prison, and with translation and linguistic rights, apart from the peace, Writers for Peace. And all the 4 committees, I feel myself that we have things in common. We are not 100% coincident, and that's the reason why there are 4 committees. But there are many things in common, and we should use the synergies in those areas to work together and to have a greater impact of what the voice of the writers, women and men, it's very important to influence. It's not that the politicians are completely, they couldn't care less about what the people from the culture is saying. We have to use that force, and we have to start recognizing that force. But there is also a previous step, which is from the point of view of peace. Peace is respect for others. If we do not respect people, other people that are surrounding us, and today through the new technologies, everybody is surrounding us in a way, we have to be very clear that is the first commitment. If I respect those that don't think the same way as I think, is the best and the only way of opening roads for understanding and at least maybe not bringing peace as a dream, but bringing peace as a solution for putting a society living together, or neighboring countries living together and accepting the others as they are. So that is something we can certainly influence from the peace, the Writers for Peace Committee that PEN International has, and I hope we'll count on the support of many PEN centers all over the world.
Yes. When we are, as PEN members, we are talking, I'm confident that just like the previous wonderful international presidents, John Ralston Saul, Jennifer Clement, our new international president, Burhan Sönmez, who is a novelist and a lawyer, very important quality of being a lawyer. I'm enthusiastic, and there is a growing synergy. We all need the synergy. And as a PEN member, as a more in a broader sense as Earthmates, yes, we can also improve our relations with other professions, and we can, as writers, try to express those who have lived, but who have not written their life stories, etc. So this we can become more active bridges between experience of others and the rest of the world. Those who can write should also write. And we have just a few minutes left. And what would you suggest to young Earthmates, all our planet?
It's well, the important thing is that I have the impression that today something has changed in the world, in the sense that the young people have a saying in many aspects, that they have to grasp that opportunity. It's not, they will not be asked by others to influence affairs, their daily affairs in their community and the world affairs through the actions that they can do. So it's an invitation to have conscience of the force that they have, and they can transform many things. Not all the people will be pushing in the same direction, certainly, because that's basic to understand that we are in a very complex and different, diverse world. But not because of that you have to rest at home and to, as you said before, leave this to your world affairs and national affairs just to politicians. Now civil society has a say, has a very important role, and I think that even those small struggles, I'm thinking of what it was in, I don't know, 50 years ago, the feminist ecologists. There are several things that have been, developed in the last in the last decades, but mainly in the 21st century, with make the participation and the appearance of young people very important. And I'm not reflecting only in my country, that where we elected a president who's 36 years old, the youngest in Latin America today. But maybe that is a metaphor, it's an example of what can be done all over the world. So yes. That's important to that they should recognize that they have the force to do it, and to be really active people influencing world affairs, protagonists of the story. That's it's important to know that.
Thank you so much. Gracias, amigo.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Germán Rojas. We are Earthmates. We are on the same planet, and we are all responsible. And our synergy should prevail against the distractors over the past. We are together. Thank you so much. Nosotros ileri. Yes.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Karim.
Together.